Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation, folks. We got a lot to talk about today. Happy Thursday. First and foremost, let's talk about President Biden and the risk of losing young black voters over this whole Israel-Hamas conflict. I'm going to show you what a recent poll has said and why the president should be concerned. Also, let's talk about how one comedian uses Dr. King, a Dr. King quote, to defend Israel and how the King family responds to that situation. Later on, we're going to be joined by our very special guest for the day, Mr. Wisdom Martin, who's a journalist with WUSA 9. And he's going to talk about the power of news as we're talking about the pursuit for context and truth. We'll have that conversation and a whole lot more, so stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation as we have a lot of big discussions up for you, folks. First and foremost, let's give a big shout out to the online culture crew. Let me get my words together here. Online culture crew, there we go. The crew is checking in, and big shout out to all of those who are stepping into the room as we're streaming. Let me get my words together. As we're streaming live on Roland Martin's YouTube page. Excuse me. And big shout out to everybody that's checking in. Big brother Willie Frazier. Good afternoon, big brother Willie. Good to connect with you once again. My pastor, Pastor Damon Lissette. Good afternoon, big brother. Jawan Evecta. Good to see you, Jawan. It's been a minute. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. Deidre Hall. Hey, Deidre. How are you? Hello, Cindy D. Good to see you once again. And who we got? Oh, H. Renee Nelson. H. Renee Nelson, thank you so much for tuning in. Along with my big brother, Conscious Thought. Conscious Thought, thank you, sir. Kathleen Davis. There we are, Kathleen. Thank you for joining us as always. And the ABX girl. Hey, girl. Hey, ABX. There we go. There we go. Sister Debbie Muhammad, peace and blessings to you as well, Sister Debbie. Thank you so much for checking us in. Brother Raymond Harris, long live Black Star Network. How about that? I love that, Brother Raymond. Long live Black Star Network. Come on, come on, come on. That's right. Christopher Booker. Hey, Culture Crew. Hey, Christopher. Thank you so much, brother, for checking in. Folks, make sure y'all join us in the conversation. This is one, I'm not going to act like this is the only chat. All right, let me say that. This is the best chat. The best group of folks to tune into a live stream on the internet, the online culture crew. So make sure y'all join us and be a part of the conversation because there's always something to talk about in the chat. All right, we're also streaming live on blackstarnetwork.com, our home platform where you can download the app, also follow us on social media, and certainly, of course, give something to help power us in this digital movement that we're in. So go to blackstarnetwork.com. Check out all the dope shows, the archive shows, the special events, special streams that we have lined up for you. And just check us out there. And just be sure to support blackstarnetwork.com. Also, we're streaming live on Amazon News on your Fire TV as well as Amazon Prime Video. That's right. We got some major partners in this process. So find us on Prime Video app under Live TV, the news. Then you can also find us on Amazon.com under Prime Video, Live TV, and news. So find us there. We're also on Freevee. Find us under On Now at News for Black Star Network. So make sure you check us out there, as well as Flex TV, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on Flex TV. All right, folks, let's jump right into the discussion because we're going to have some good ones. We got some good ones lined up. All right, first and foremost, now, I've been talking about this Israel-Hamas conflict because there are so many different angles. I mean, it's not just about the conflict itself. It really is about the implications, the reverberations of this conflict on other elements of our government, of our culture that we're experiencing here in America. So I came across this piece and I said, I got to bring this to the crew. This is a piece by DeGrio, and we're going to be joined by my brother, Sinedu Okorafor, who's a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist, and get his take on this. But this is a piece by DeGrio where they talked about that President Biden, folks, is really at a risk of losing not just some voters, some young black voters. Yeah, he's really at a risk of losing some young black voters because of the stance that he has led his administration to take on this Israel-Hamas conflict. Before we get into the numbers, let me bring in my brother Sinedu. Thank you so much, big brother. As always, to have you. It's a pleasure to have you. How are you feeling this afternoon?
I'm still alive, so I can't complain.
Okay. Yes, sir. That's definitely a gift, so I'm not going to trip about that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about President Biden here. He's at the risk of losing some young black voters. Here's the numbers, brother Sinedu and the crew. And I want y'all to join us in the chat to share your thoughts on this. Here's the latest from the Grio, and it's based upon a survey, a poll that was done by NPR, PBS, NewsHour, and Marist poll. This is the latest poll around where folks are, black voters and young black voters are on this situation and how the president is handling this conflict. Take a look at this. According to that poll, NPR, PBS, NewsHour, and Marist poll, just 48% of Gen Z and millennials said the U.S. should publicly voice support for Israel, compared with 63% of Gen X, 83% of baby boomers, and 86% of the silent generation, meaning that those who are the youngest generation right now, Gen Z, saying they have the least number of they're saying they are least support of the president's stance. Along racial lines, just 51% of voters of color said the U.S. should take a public stance supporting Israel, while 72% of whites thought the opposite. Anecdotally, from Capitol Hill to Hollywood to college campuses, young and liberal Americans are expressing their solidarity with Palestinians and voicing discontent with Biden's lack of criticism of Israel. This is very interesting, Brother Sinedu. You work in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when we look at these numbers and showing that there is a disparity along racial lines and there's a disparity among generational lines, what does that say to you? Is the president at risk of losing young black voters going into 2024 with this conflict?
Yeah, I think the president, and I want to be clear, this is not just about 2024. This is moving forward. All presidential or all elected officials should be very careful about losing black and, more importantly, young voters, because young voters in this day and age, as the data shows, they really care about what they care about. And it's possibly because a lot of young voters, they're really shown to be into the environment. Because of technology, they're very tuned into what is happening around the world. And because of historical significance, they are putting two and two together that, Palestine, I think Ta-Nehisi Coates made a comparison, like, that whole idea of Palestine and what's going on there, Black people can relate to that. So there's a lot of relatability. And I also believe that with every young generation, that this happened now, 10 years ago, 10 years before, every young generation believes that the generation before them should have handled this. And I think what it is this generation is standing on the side of feeling as if that we shouldn't be a coward to what we stand by. And I think that is why President Biden should be very, very careful, because politics as usual doesn't work for the young. And I think if you look at the entertainment industry and people say, where do you see the significance? I said, well, pay attention. If you look at how entertainment worked, once upon a time, you had to be kind of spit clean or whatever, or a nice, clean a profile and this and that and this. But with this whole age of everybody accepting their bodies, their sexuality, their ideals, that is falling into the idea of politics as usual is not good enough for this generation. They want to be represented by their truths and by things that to them matter. And it seems that President Biden is just leaning on the airs of business as usual. And we'll see how that's reflected in the polls.
Got you. So he's leaning on the air of business as usual, whereas some people might take that or interpret that as him not really being progressive. Like he's not listening to his constituents. He's not listening to the next generation.
Right.
And I think that there is something to that. I think there is something to that. I think there's a huge concern though, because some people would say, well, the history between these two countries, and I'm speaking of America and Israel, runs deep. The history between Israel and Palestine run deep. And I'm not trying to get into the woods of that, but what we're simply talking about is the implications of it, right? Like
Right.
we're talking about if you, it depends on depending on who you are and where you're from. One thing can be seen as aggression, another thing can be seen as victimhood, another thing can be seen as colonialism, another seems to be freedom fighting. So, from your vantage point, Sinead, how do we kind of like navigate through that? Because that the narrative of this story is getting jumbled, and it is highly biased depending on who you get your news from, where you get your information from. What's your take around it?
Yeah, I really think, it's this case in particular is very, uh, it has been made to be difficult to decipher. And it's historically been made to be difficult to decipher just based on historical significance. However, when you think about truth and justice, what I believe is taking place, and this is not me making my stance on Israel, it's just what I'm thinking about, because I am also a part of this young generation.
Right.
If the president is supposed to be the quote unquote father of our country, and America quote unquote doesn't bow to anyone, that's what we say all the time, that has been up for question lately. It seems like, okay, let's say by the story of you hearing on CNN, Hamas attacked 1,400, okay? And Israel has the right to defend themselves. Absolutely, but there's also international law. And it seems as if our president, again, this is just by how it seems as like he's lacking the courage to speak up about that international law and have a firm stance on what he believes. And I think that, coupled with other things, is making folks feel like it's not hard to toe the line, is that this man has made a choice, and his choice is this. And then on their side, the young people have a choice, because we don't want war. I mean, we didn't live through some of the great wars, but we do remember what happened in Afghanistan and what happened in Iraq and so on.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We know how this ends. We know how 20 years later somebody can say, well, this maybe wasn't the best idea, but by that time billions have been spent and lives have been lost.
Great point. Look, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to continue this conversation. Kuri, I would love to get your take on this as we talk about President Biden and the risk of losing young Black voters. How the latest poll from NPR and PBS and Marist poll showing that Generation Z, the youngest of the generations, 48%, a little bit less than half of those who were polled agree with the stance that President Biden taking, leaving 52% to kind of say, nah, this is not the right move, and they're making their stand for solidarity. And I want to get your take on this, because here's the other thing, folks, before we take our pause. If young Black voters are saying, nah, I'm not going to ride with Biden on this election because of this stance, and then you have older Black voters who are saying, yeah, I mean, you can't accept every single decision, like every decision that a politician make, you're not going to agree with. So we still have to ride with him because on the other issues, he's A, B, and C. He's doing this, he's doing that. It could lead to a generational gap. It can lead to discord within the voting between the two generations. A whole lot can come out of that moment. So we want to continue to talk a little bit about this. Crew, I want to get your take. Join us as we stream it live on YouTube on the Roland Martin's YouTube page. And of course, stay with us, because the conversation will continue on the other side right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture. Weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in as we talk about a new poll that shows that President Biden may be at risk. He may be at risk, folks, of losing young black voters due to the stance that he and his administration is taking in showing unwavering, unfettering support for Israel through this latest chapter of the Israel-Hamas conflict. A conflict that has continued to rock the whole world, where a number of issues have come up, especially around humanitarian aid, and more importantly, the role that the United States of America will play in this whole conflict. Now, President Biden has announced that he's going to give billions of dollars to the state of Israel, and at the same time, he's giving hundreds of about $100 million in humanitarian aids. And some folks are just saying that's not enough, Mr. President. And of the group that's saying that's not enough are young black voters. And young black voters are making it clear now in 2023 that they will not be voting for this president come 2024, leaving a big question of uncertainty of how the president, his team, is going to continue to try to win over the next generation of young black voters. Let me bring in my brother Shanadu, back into this conversation, because I think this is very interesting, which is why I wanted to have a conversation with you, bro, about this, because you're in that group, right? You're talking about Generation Z, Gen Zers, but you said it best. The politics are changing, and the president has to keep up. And I think that's the big challenge. Who said this? Let me see. Somebody in the crew said this, that the president has to walk a fine line, and I couldn't agree more. Cindy D, you said Biden is playing both sides like a fiddle. He's walking a fine line, and he has to. You have this interest of the United States for that part of the region. You have the interest of the United States in supporting Israel, right? But then you do have another generation of Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians that reside in the United States of America, who are part of the voting bloc, the Democratic Party in particular, and they want to have their voices heard. So when an international issue or international crisis like this happens, they want to be heard, especially given the severity of the crisis of what we're seeing right now, where food is being cut off, water is being cut off, electricity is down, communications is down. This is a real humanitarian crisis, not just about warfare, not just about hostages, but you're talking about the common man, common woman in the Gaza Strip that is suffering as a result of these attacks. Now, let's take a look here very quickly. I want to share this part of the conversation with you, Sinead, and then get your take on this. Lisa, let's do quote number 2 on this. This is from the GRIO, where UN Security Secretary General Antonio Guterres accused the Israeli government of breaking international humanitarian law. This is from the UN Secretary General. Similarly, in a letter last week, America's first black president, Barack Obama, said the Israeli government's decision to cut off food, water, and electricity in Gaza, quote, threatens not only to worsen a growing humanitarian crisis, but also could, quote, undermine long-term efforts to achieve peace and stability in the region. Biden and his administration have repeatedly said they will stand by Israel and its right to defend its citizens from terrorism. You talked about this, Brother Sinead. So the UN is saying this is a problem. Former president, he's not going all the way in, because I don't think he wants to influence the American people, because he's still quite popular, right, in the eyes of Black America and the eyes of America. But he is focusing and saying, look, this is going to be a real situation, with this humanitarian piece. So what do you make of that?
I make of this that people need to listen and pay attention, because at the end of the day, with what's going on, especially I think people should look up the GDP of Israel. We're going to start there. Look at the GDP of Israel and understand that we're about to give them tens of billions of your dollars and my dollars. Look up the GDP of Palestine, and we're giving them hundreds of millions. You cannot leave Palestine without permission of the Israeli government.
Right.
You cannot leave Palestine without permission of the Israeli government. So ask yourself this. These people have no way out. These people have moved south. They were moving into shelters. They were being bombed. What exactly are we funding? Last month, our student loan repayments restarted. And as much as we hate them and we want them forgiven, what we have to show for it is our degrees, that we graduated. So you know what? It's high, it's inflated, but we have to pay it because we graduated. Ask yourself, the tens and billions in tax dollars that are going to Israel that will end up killing people. What do we have to show for that? And I think, interestingly enough, the young people have this statement that calls "keep that same energy." Where was that energy just a couple of months ago when Niger was getting rid of the French and all of these other people? And here comes the U.S. saying, "Y'all can't do that. Y'all can't do that." But they were protecting their people.
Right.
Of the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they're extracting coltan and cobalt. What if they stop funding our electric and EV markets here with child slave labor that we accept to get our iPhones and our iPads? What if they stopped on behalf of their people? Would you support them having the right to defend themselves? I just wonder, where is this energy? And furthermore, with Israel being such a great power, my question is, why do we need to garner them with so much financial support when Israel is strong? We didn't bring any support to Russia with the people who were anti-Russia Ukraine war in Russia, who may have needed humanitarian help. We didn't send them tens of billions of dollars, but we supported Ukraine because they were the little guy and they wanted to defend themselves. Where is that respect for Palestine? Where is that respect for Arab folks? And back to the young Black voter, it's like, where is the respect for me? Because I too have seen that in the Americas. So that's why these statistics aren't lying, because it looks too damn familiar.
It does look familiar. Marylander 37, you checked in and said, we don't support settler colonialism anywhere in the world. Now, I want to point out something that my sister Corinna Denise said. She said, not to diminish what's happening in Israel or Gaza, but I don't recall seeing the same energy from young folks regarding Haiti, or other African countries. Perhaps I miss it or don't recall. So what do you make of that, Shadidu? I mean, we're talking about the continent now. Your home, my home, we're talking about the continent. So when we see that, and yesterday I used the term that Chris Rock coined, selective outrage. Is that the situation that we're finding with young people about President Biden? Do you feel like young people just needed a reason not to support President Biden because maybe the reasons of him being white, being older, is maybe not cutting the mustard? But they're like, oh, but look at his stance on Israel and Palestine. Do you feel like this is another issue of selective outrage here?
No,
to Corinna's point.
I don't think it's an issue of selective outrage. I think it's an issue of if anybody has a communications background, it's called agenda setting. You didn't speak up for Haiti or Africa is because, I hate to say this, it's not designed for you to speak up. And I know you believe, even if you don't care about Palestine or Israel currently, even if you don't care, it's everywhere. So whether you wanted to speak on it or not, it is so visible that you have an opinion. But Haiti and African countries, they're never spoken about on the news, not consistently, not front page, not social media campaigns.
So you think though, but you think that if the story of Haiti and other Caribbean islands, some of the conflict and issues and troubles of Caribbean islands, or even our African nations,
yes,
that if the story was really told in our mainstream media, that we would actually see more young people speaking up. But because their stories aren't being told, their conflicts aren't being covered the way this conflict is, that it opens the door for that type of situation. Which look, there is media bias, right? Like there is media bias, there's cultural bias, there is bias in the storytelling in American media. We know that. So I think there's something to that, Brother Shadidu.
Absolutely. And to go even further, I mean, of course, you asked me this, which young Black person wouldn't want to hear about the nation that defeated white people? That's all I'm going to say. I'm sure they would love to hear about what's going on in Haiti and probably maybe get some inspiration. But again, agenda setting is real, and it's playing out in its forefront. And then when you think about it from a media perspective, you have to ask yourself, who in Haiti is a top media executive in America? Who in Israel is a top media executive, anchor, etc. in America? You do your own research and you ask those questions and get yourself your answers.
Cindy D, you said we don't take care of home, we take care of the world. That's America's problem. You can't be a superpower if you're not powerful in the world, though, Sister Cindy. You know, that's how it goes. That's how it goes. Let's talk. Monkey Confession said down ballot vote in 2024 if you're not feeling Biden, but don't completely abstain from the voting process. Write in, if you can, reparations for president. What's your take on that? Like this down ballot voting? Like, okay, so you may not vote for him, but still go ahead and vote. Still be involved in the process.
Yeah, I think you should still be involved in the process, but I think you should vote for the interest of your community. Whatever your community has deemed is best for them is who you should, I mean, that's what every other group is doing, and it seems to work. I think when it comes to us, the pivotal vote, we get so confused where it's like you have to be Black and be Democratic, or you have to be Black and you must be Republican. I think that's where we lose. It's not about your political party or your affiliation. It's about who is representing our interest. Point blank, period. Doesn't matter who you are or what you represent. It's as long as our interest is being met, that is how one should be voting. I think it's very dangerous when we do the voting based on, well, Democrats have historically been be careful with history, because history shows you very many different stories when you look back at it in long terms. So I'm hoping folks are voting based on the interest of their community and based on who intends to help their community with their mandate.
And you know what? Very quickly, we got to take a quick pause. But I think we should coin the phrase "vote your values."
There you go.
If you're against oppression, see, I think this is where it gets crazy at, right, Sinead? Like at the end of the day, if you vote based on your values and your principles, then that becomes the metric, that becomes the standard by which you make your decisions. So if you vote your values, if you are one who is against oppression and tyranny, then you take the information that you have about Israel and Palestine and that conflict and say, okay, how does my values fit in this particular conflict? Or you look at the situation in the other place. Where does my values fit into this? But vote your values. If you're talking about voting based upon party, or if you're talking about voting based upon locale, nationality, then I think you're missing the point. I think it's very much easier, and I think this requires us to be authentic in our political expression, that it's easier to say, okay, where are my values? What is my personal politics? And I don't think that these young people are completely uninformed. You see what I'm saying? And I don't think and y'all gonna really, I'm gonna mess y'all up with this one. Every time we talk about the issues of Israel and Palestine, doesn't mean we got to go through the intricacies of a 75 years worth of history. That's just not possible. I can't have a conversation on the show and be like, nope, we got to bring in a college professor. Nope, we got to bring. It's like, no. Let's have a conversation as us, as people who may not necessarily be the scholars, quote unquote, but we all have the ability to think critically, to take in information and to make judgments and to gain ideas and to garner some level of understanding. But you don't always have to, because these conversations, these comments I'm seeing on social media, it's not based on scholarly research. It's based on what people have access to. They see this, they respond that way. They see that, they respond this way. Vote your values. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's shift gears a little bit, because I'm going to share with you what one comedian has done to use Dr. King's quote to defend her position on Israel and how the King family responds. Stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches. I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. All right, I've been talking to my brother, Shanedu, our Call for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Specialist, as we talk about this poll about President Biden and the risk of him losing young black voters around the stance the United States is taking within this Israel-Hamas conflict. But here's what a lot of folks are saying. I'm looking at the chat, brother Shanedu. And folks are like saying, okay, values is one thing, but Farajii, it is all about interest. So I just took them a quick pause during the break to say, all right, let me look up what the word interest is. Very interesting, to say the least. When you're talking about interest, according to Cambridge Dictionary, the activities that you enjoy doing, when something is of interest, it holds your attention and makes you want to learn more about it. Okay, so it holds your attention and it's gotten you wanting to learn more about it. Vote your interest. Okay, that's fine. Just want to hold that. But then when you're talking about values, a person's principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. So one thing holds your attention when you want to learn more about it. The other thing is something that is important to you. Now, which one is actually closer to who you are? That's what I'm saying. Which one do we want to kind of rest upon here? Are we talking about values or are we talking about interest? Now, interest, yes, that's fine. But when you're talking about values, this is intrinsic stuff. And I think, Brother Shanedu, this is part of the challenge where, you know, we try to act as if politics is outside of us. When in fact, you cannot have no politics if you don't know who you are. It's not outside of us. It's intrinsic. It's inside of us. No policy comes out of a space outside of the individuals who are formulating the policy. If we want to talk about that major 1994 drug bill, that crime bill, right? Well, what was the values that undergirded that particular policy, right? What were some of the things that I'm talking about? What was in the mind and the heart? Now, we can't determine that, but I'm just saying that whatever's in your head, whatever's how you see the world, that's going to come in through policy. It's not something like outside of you. It's not something separate from you. This is stuff that is inherent in you. This is stuff that comes from within. Am I wrong in thinking this?
You're on it. And I think part of the problem is you thinking that it has nothing to do with you or doesn't involve you or you're not involved is the best way for you to be tricked to the point of the drug thing where you may think, oh yeah, this isn't going to do with me in 94 or 92 when it came out. But now in 2023, you're seeing all of its effects and how it affects the community you grew up in and the tax revenue and the brand new house that you just bought and how the education, it so much is involved. It's whether you're choosing to care or not care about your involvement.
And see, that's the thing. Like, okay, we may not say the term values, and I'm glad that you brought this term up, bro. What are the things that you care about? Not the things that you want to fight up against or things that you're against, because we're always asked that. Like, what are you against? Nobody's going to say I'm against schools. And what are the things that you care about? And I'm saying really get into your mind. And I think this is the part of the process that I think that is required for all generations, all people, black, white, whatever, you know, all people in all generations. It's not just about it's not just about something like, oh, I'm just doing it into the interest. Because personally, I don't think that that's enough to hold people. Because I feel like your interests will change depending on the circumstances. But your values, if you are a person that values the sustainability of the family unit, that's not going to change regardless of who's in office, regardless of what's happening within the culture. You as a father, you as a mother is going to work to make that value a reality. All right, let me just share this with y'all very quickly. Amy Schumer, she's often on, I think she started on Saturday Night Live, gone on to Hollywood, but she used a Dr. King quote to defend her stance on Israel. And the King family is not happy with that. Take a look at this. Let's post quote one, please, Lise. According to the Hollywood Reporter, on October 30th, Amy Schumer uploaded video footage of Martin Luther King Jr. decrying anti-Semitism and defending Israel's right to exist. In response, King took to, and talking about Bernice King took to social media to emphasize that if her father lived today, he would have supported a ceasefire. Amen. She said, certainly, my father was against anti-Semitism, as am I. He also believed militarism, along with racism and poverty, to be among the interconnected triple evils. She said, I am certain he would call for Israel's bombing of Palestinians to cease, for hostages to be released, and for us to work for true peace, which includes justice. And Bernice King has repeatedly called for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. She took to X to passionately urge a ceasefire and immediate deployment to Gaza of additional crucial life-saving supplies at the scale needed. We can't wait. This is one of the issues, I think, Brother Shanadu, that we have in our culture where we can take a moment, a quote like Amy Schumer did, and take it out of and put it somewhere else without proper context, bro. And it will start to become a problem when you're telling the real history of where that person stood. I don't think anybody is for anti-Semitism, right? But at the same time, I don't understand how this woman, Amy Schumer, was able to think, oh, I'm going to use this and not understand the full picture of Dr. King, of where he stood. Dr. King didn't believe in war either. But then guess what? Dr. King didn't also believe in getting and staying in an oppressed position. He didn't believe in oppression because that was his value. So what do you make of this, bro? When we start to get into this space of massaging and using another person's word, a person that we love, that we go to for guidance, and the next thing you know, we're using it as a way to defend our stance without a full context. What's your take?
Well, unfortunately, Martin Luther King Jr., rest his soul, he is the transitive black. He's the person that everybody gets to use, gets to name streets about, but that nobody gets to actually pay attention to his life and why it was taken. I think what is so white of Amy Schumer is to utilize that quote to make a greater stance on Dr. Martin Luther King. I wonder where that energy is in a homegrown context where she could have been using those words of Dr. Martin Luther King to stand with, let's say, the people who've been protesting with SAG-AFTRA, or the union workers who've been protesting from multiple facets of our country. Because we knew that Dr. King stood with those folks on a consistent basis through his life. But choosing to weaponize that one clip is just, it is quintessential whiteness. It's to say, look, even one of yours said this. The most revered of you said this. And I'm glad that the King's family came and came to the defense, because I think it is very dangerous to cut and paste a piece of Dr. King again and not go in full context.
And guess what, bro? And let me just throw this in there very quickly. This is not just about Amy Schumer.
Mm-hmm.
This is a lesson that we can all learn from.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying as black folks, right? Like we can take the quote of any one of our great black heroes and sheroes and fit them in accordance to our view of things, right? Without giving people a context of without giving people full context of where that person stood. When Dr. King said what he said about Israel, look at the time that he said it. What time frame are you talking about? Are you talking about the 50s? You talking about the 60s? When are you talking about? And that will give you a greater understanding of the time of that. If Israel was established in 1947, 1948, and then you look at 7 or 10 years later, Dr. King saying something about that Israel has a right to exist. But Israel has grown to be a superpower in that part of the world as well. Since that time that Dr. King said his words. But Dr. King's prevailing view and value and interest is no war. Is the fact that would he be happy with Israel's accumulation of nuclear war, of nuclear armament?
And I think that, see, I love when I say something earlier and it ends up coming back to be
come on
at the end, just like a good pastor. Back to what I was telling y'all about agenda setting. What Amy Schumer did is no different than how America continues to speak of Martin Luther King as I have a dream and not the speech he made to the sanitation worker. That's agenda setting. That is to control you to think one way about something. And that is the major point of what I've been saying. And I think what she, again, and this is not the first time Amy Schumer, remember what happened after the Oscars. It's not the first time Amy Schumer has jumped into business that don't belong to her or that she should not be jumping into. But if I may put this out there, Farajii, let's stop quoting the dead. Let's pay attention to the living. Did you hear the Freudian slips of the president of Israel, Netanyahu, the foreign minister of Israel, who I think both had Freudian slips within the last week, where they literally said out their mouth that we're trying to destroy these people. And then that they're even saying that they're not. Again, no one made them say this. And they said this on national television. This is not AI generated. You can go look it up. So it's like, I find it interesting that these folk defending themselves can say the most heinous things in the world. And let's say defense is the right thing to do. But heinous should be heinous no matter who says it, whether it's defense or indefensible. But it's interesting how no one is holding Netanyahu, who, let's be clear, beyond this point, y'all love to look at postseason. Let's look at the offseason. No one likes Netanyahu. Do y'all read? And that's why I find all of this to be very performative. And remember 9/11, 2001. The day before that attack, I don't think anybody could give two shits about George Bush. But what happened by 9/12/2001? All of a sudden, he was the greatest man ever. We forgot about everything else because of what took place. Don't be confused by the okie doke.
Let me take this, and my brother, I gotta let you go. Deidre said Amy Schumer needs to be quiet. Conscious thought, you said something people need to remember about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is this: at the time of his assassination, his national approval rating from Gallup was less than 40%. Facts. He was not the most beloved black man in America. Matter of fact, black people was not feeling Dr. King after a while. And I'm talking about from his own clergy. I'm talking about from his own pastoral colleagues. That's fact. That is fact. CC Knight, you said, I'm truly enjoying the conversation, brothers. Much love. Thank you, CC. We truly appreciate you for that. Corinna, you said Dr. King nor Malcolm X would be withholding the vote because they understood its power. It's this. Look, man, this is a serious situation. Jairus Latrell, you said, Jairus, it was another snippet of a great speech that has been taken out of context by people outside of our culture. And that's why, hey, look, that's why when we have these conversations, we do have to be cognizant of the fact that somebody's going to take the conversation. They're going to take that and take it out of context. But guess what? You take anything that's out of context, it's so big. We can't stop you from doing what you do. But what we can do is what? Speak the truth, right? And wherever this point is taken out of context, when you really listen to whatever is being said in its proper context, there's going to be one thing you can do. You're only going to agree with it, or you're going to just perish because of it. Just speak the truth. If you're speaking the truth and it's taken out of context, guess what? You're still going to be the winner because truth always stands alone. It cannot be defeated, unlike the internet. It's like the internet, right? My brother Sinedu, I appreciate you. I love you. Thank you so much for joining us and providing your insight. God willing, we will reconnect with you very soon. Thank you, brother Sinedu.
Love you too, brother. Inshallah. See you soon.
Yes, sir. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about the power of news as we're talking about the pursuit of context and truth. We're going to be checking in with journalist Wisdom Martin from WUSA 9 to talk to us about the role that he plays as a journalist and what he sees and how we should have certain conversations. Stay with us. The conversation continues on the other side right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home. You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind $100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation as we are about to embark on the second half of the show to talk about some of the big cultural conversations. And this next discussion I'm having with a very special guest. I'm so happy to have my brother joining me as he is an anchor and journalist for WUSA 9 in Washington, D.C., and he is going to give us some insight as to what we're looking at. How do we make sure that we dissect information in such a way that we can understand its context and essentially get to the truth? So we're going to be talking about the power of news. And I'm happy to have him joining us here, Brother Wisdom Martin. Brother Wisdom, thank you so much, brother. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing great. How you doing? Thank you very much for having me, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, brother, it's an honor and pleasure to have you joining us this afternoon. So I thank you so much for your time. I want to kind of get your take on, this space that we are finding ourselves in. And I know that as one who is in the space of reporting information, reporting the news, it's essential that you try to do this with great integrity. There are journalistic ethics and a code of ethics among journalists. But do you see that kind of slowly being diminished every day because of not just the rise of social media, but because of the mentality of where we are as a people, as a culture in this country, where facts, truth, those things seem to be slowly being pushed to the side, and opinions and alternative facts has taken front and center stage. What's your take on
Right.
that?
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think a lot of it has to do with social media because anybody can put anything on social media and sometimes people just don't fact check. So it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Once it gets out there on social media, anybody can pick it up and they repost it and then it gets reposted a bunch of times. And then the next thing you know, the untruth becomes fact just based on the fact that it's been reposted thousands and thousands of times all over the country and all over the world. And again, it's not some people aren't fact checking this, they're just taking it as truth. The other thing is the rise probably started about, I'm going to say 10, maybe 15 years ago with the back and forth talking, one journalist versus another journalist. I saw this big in sports many years ago, one journalist versus another journalist. That's what it started with. And it started my opinion versus your opinion. And then it started to slowly pick up steam. So now you go from having, this is just an example, but you go from having, all right, you got two guys up here talking about highlights to one guy screaming about this team or this player is better than another player, and another guy on another side doing the same thing. That took over because people started to enjoy that. They didn't want to just sit down and just get the highlights and have somebody read them highlights. That's an example. And then that started to bleed over into news. So now people started to want more and more of the, we're presenting this side and then we're presenting this side. Let's try to get both sides, and people going back and forth at each other. And that created a bunch of networks that are doing that. So then people started gravitating towards that and started leaving the actual people who were sitting up there telling us, here are the facts, here are the news, here's the news, because it started to deviate and it wasn't interesting to them anymore. And you'll see the numbers decline because there's so many television stations and networks. So it's a huge, huge problem.
It's a huge problem, and I'm so happy that you brought up that history, Brother Wisdom, because I'm recalling in my head, like I'm a huge football fan, and when I
Yeah.
listen to the announcers and to the analysts, they give you all of the extra stuff, right? Some of them, I
Right.
mean, it ends up on social media when some of them just have these Freudian slips and calls out
Right.
certain things, and you're just like, what the hell does this mean? This has nothing
Right.
to do with football. You know what I'm saying? And
Exactly.
it's like, I think the latest example of this is the whole Taylor Swift phenomenon
Right.
and how anchors constantly, I mean, you're like,
Yeah.
you're like, there are a lot of other celebrities that show up in football games.
Right. Right. But the problem is, like you just said, that's a perfect example. But now the game is on, and then they latch on to Taylor Swift, and then now it becomes a Monday through Friday. Oh yeah, by the way, there was a game being played between Kansas City and some opponent. But let's talk about Taylor Swift because she might be dating or she is dating Travis Kelce, which has nothing to do with football. So now that narrative, instead of talking about here's what Kansas City did and here's what their opponents did, whether they won or lost. Now the narrative is, oh my gosh, did you see Taylor Swift at the game? She's dating Travis Kelce. Let's dissect that 9,000 ways. Are they dating? What's the body language? Did you see her with Travis Kelce's mom? How happy did she look with the mom? So now it's starting turning into that. So now information gets pushed to the side because think about it. No, I got nothing against Taylor Swift. I got nothing against
Me neither.
any of that. But information-wise, what is that really telling me if I'm a football fan, if I'm an NFL fan, if I'm a Kansas City fan, or if I'm a fan of their opponents? I'm sitting there like, okay, how did my team do? Why did we lose this game? And I'm watching the romance or fake romance or whatever it is between Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. I mean,
Being
that's
discussed
where you
by
have the misinformation start. I mean, the dissecting of the real information I guess it's called infotainment. That's not really relevant to anything that I'm doing.
And Brother Wisdom, that's the thing, because you're seeing this whole play out by two professional athletes who are called to be analysts of the game, and now they
Right.
become these like cultural spaces. And I want to kind of get your take on that because we
Mhm.
are seeing. I remember when the Daily Show first came out with
Right.
when Jon Stewart took host, and Daily Show was one of my favorite shows. But there were a lot of major think pieces that came out at that time where it talked about this fuzziness of the lines between comedic news, the way that Comedy Central
Mhm.
had presented the news, and then real news, the work that you do, right?
Right.
And people were saying, "Uh-oh,
Right.
this is dangerous.
Yes.
This is very, very dangerous." That here you have a comedian who's sitting behind a large desk, camera shots looking very similar
Mm-hmm.
to the regular news. He's got the
Right.
graphics of the regular news. He's telling you, and he's playing. You can hear the laughs and all of those things.
Right.
And the truth, I mean, he's reporting, but he's also providing his
Right.
opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, what does that, now that we're seeing more shows, and I love the Daily Show
Right.
because of the satire of it, but is there concern among journalists like yourself and others that sometimes satire can lead us down a dangerous path?
Right, it does, and it's the same. It's all connected to what's going on with. I talked about social media earlier. It's the same thing because you have shows. There's a show on HBO by a host that does that same thing where they take the facts and then they try to add some humor into it, some satire into it. And the danger is people, again, will take this as hardcore fact and not do the joke part of it or the satire part of it and just take the other part of it and just run with it. There's an entire network, and you know what I'm talking about. There's an entire network based on people just sitting up there talking, and it's not based on facts. It's playing to a certain audience that will not fact check and will take information, misinformation, and run with it. And the reason that that's dangerous is because now you're taking misinformation. You're feeding it out to people who do not fact check or do not, sometimes they don't even care. They just hear one thing, whatever they feel like they want to hear, they take it and run with it. And then they take that out into society. And that's in the back of their minds when they're approaching people that are being talked about on these shows that are not based in fact.
Right.
That's where a lot of this stuff starts to be dangerous and troublesome. And that's why I'll say also it's very important when it comes to being the remaining real journalists and real journalism. We're talking about hardcore journalism here, that you have representation in the room. You hear people talk all the time about representation matters. I can tell you firsthand, I've been doing journalism, television news for over 30 years. Over 30 years from the time going back to when I was in college. Representation matters because when you get in the room and you start discussing what you're going to cover for the any news like the news organizations, you have to be in the room. People of color need to be in that room because that offers some different perspective about why we're doing this story. And it also can break up some of the negative narratives that okay, we're doing this story because of this. So if you're in the room, you can say, well, that's not necessarily true. That neighborhood is not this. That person is not this. I'll say one more thing about what I just said to add to it, and then I'll toss it back to you.
Yes,
But
sir.
again, I'm going to say we see a lot of this when it comes to sports. And because everything's all tied in, narratives are created about Black athletes that are harsh, hardcore, and super negative anytime a Black athlete does anything. For example, Deion Sanders and his kids on at Colorado. Every time they're being they're celebrating victories and they're being brash, they're considered bad people. They're considered arrogant. They're considered why are you allowed to do this? These types of things. When you see other people do it, that's not the story that's being told. I watched Rob Gronkowski with the New England Patriots just cut up every time he scores a touchdown, and nobody. Oh, he's just a great guy. So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. If you're in the room, you get to partake in these conversations and say, well, wait a minute, hold up. Why is this person being demonized and why is this other person not being demonized? We shouldn't be approaching this way. And unfortunately, sometimes we're not in the room. And unfortunately, sometimes for the sake of entertainment, people get to be demonized. Well, these horrible athletes, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? I had a discussion with somebody one time at one of my old stations about this, and they were saying, I don't understand why these athletes make all this money and they can't do this and they can't do that and they make these bad decisions. Well, the truth of the matter is a lot of these athletes that we're talking about come from neighborhoods that are not well off. They come from backgrounds that are not that great. So and then they go to college on these scholarships and become superior athletes. And then they go to the pros and then they get a lot of money. So you have someone who comes from a negative background, and you know what I mean when I say negative background, with no guidance, the parents and the family not necessarily in their corner, and then you give them a bunch of money. And that sometimes that's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely.
And if you're not there to say, wait a minute, you don't demonize the guy because he doesn't know and because he's making mistakes, because other people make mistakes. This just happens to be a high profile athlete that's making these mistakes, whether it's with his money or whether it's with other decisions that he makes. We have to be in the room.
Look, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come forward, more conversation with my brother Wisdom Martin, who is a journalist for WUSA 9 in Washington, D.C., as we talk about the power of news, folks, and the pursuit of context and the truth. I want to hear from you, crew. I want you to get your take on this as we talk about all of these things. And this is just from sports to just the presentation of news, but there is an impact. There is a consequence on all of this. And now let's talk about it, the consequence that Black America will feel and continue to feel as a result of this. So, folks, we're just really getting started with my brother Wisdom, and of course with you. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
A lot of stuff that we're not getting, you get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Your money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is RolandS.Martin.com. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in as we are having a very special conversation with our very special guest today, Brother Wisdom Martin, who is a journalist with WUSA 9 in Washington, D.C., talking about the power of news, the pursuit of context and truth. I want to go back to something that you said, Brother Wisdom, about representation.
Mm-hmm.
One of the key reasons why Brother Roland Martin even started this network is because there was a gap of representation in telling news, and more importantly, and focusing on those stories that would be both
Mm-hmm.
empowering and informative to Black America. But this is not the only news space, Black news space. You have the Afro newspaper out of Baltimore, the Final Call newspaper in Chicago. Years ago, there was the Pittsburgh Courier. There were a lot more Black news spaces years ago than it is now, but which is ironic
Mm-hmm.
because more Black people are we're in a much different position than say 50 years ago. We
Right.
have more technology and we have more consciousness now. So I want to kind of get your take on that level of representation. Why is it that we seem to not be as represented in the news and information space, even though we have made greater gains?
Well, one of the things is here's one of the immediate problems that I see here is that a lot of times, news is driven by ratings and numbers, and a lot of times if you put a news program, and this is on the consumer, a news program up against say a reality TV show, where I'm not going to call out anyone. I got no problem against reality TV shows. You do whatever you do. I'm not hating on anybody. Get your money. But if you put a news program up against a reality TV show, more than likely, depending on which reality show we're talking about, that reality TV show is going to have really high numbers. And the news program where you're giving out information and telling stories about the community might not do as well as a reality show because the reality show is drama. It's a bunch of drama. It's not necessarily good drama, but it's a narrative and it's drama and they're selling something. So that's on the consumer. Why are we turning there instead of trying to get information and trying to learn more about what's going on in our communities and in our town? So that's number one. Number
Right.
two, the representation part. Again, I've been in this business for a long time. And I've been in newsrooms where none of the people making any of the decisions about what's going on in the community look like me for a long time. And it's hard to figure out how that's even possible when you see how many journalists, how many minority journalists are in the business. They go to the National Association of Black Journalism every year. And it's definitely gotten better than it has been in the past. Obviously, like you said, we're in a much better situation than we were, as far as numbers, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
But the question still remains is, why are there not more of us in these positions of power? Because the people are out there, and I'm going to tie this back into sports. I know you're like, well, this is not a sports conversation, but I'm going to tie it back into sports, where you're talking about positions of leadership, because that's what this is all about, positions of leadership where you can get to make these calls. When you think about the National Football League, and how they do the black coaches in the National Football League. It's kind of a similar situation when it comes to positions of leadership in America. That's why all of this is relevant. Eric Bieniemy, who was the offensive coordinator, black offensive coordinator with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's here in Washington now with the Washington Commanders. All right.
Right.
Eric Bieniemy was the offensive coordinator for 2 Super Bowl winning teams with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And he went to another Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Did not get a job. Could not get a job. So they there was some kind of false narrative created about him, about his attitude, and about his approach. Meanwhile, in those 3 Super Bowls, everybody that they beat in the playoffs, or not everybody, but a lot of the teams that they beat in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl, those coordinators got jobs. Now here he is beating them on a regular basis, and they're getting jobs, and then they're saying, oh, okay, well, he's not getting a job because of this, or is he really doing all of that? There's some kind of negative connotation about him, but it's not done about everybody else. And you have that same thing in society. I'm gonna bring it back outside of football, but you have that same thing in society where you will have these African-American people who are trying to get into these positions of leadership. And then there's some kind of narrative. Oh, is it the attitude? Is it the approach? Is it something about us, people that look like me, that they either can't find or there's something else going on here? It's the positions of leadership and the positions of leadership and the positions of authority. So that is probably why we see what we see when it comes to certain, certain networks and certain media. Because again, if you don't have us in the room, then our stories don't get told, and we don't get a chance to fight for those stories.
But and I think it's a couple of things come to my mind. It's interesting, very ironic, Brother Wisdom, that when you talk about the NFL's there, of course, the people that are in those, corner suites making all of those decisions,
Right.
the owners and the general managers making those decisions, and they predominantly that's a white group of people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
White males. Let me say that. Let me get very specific. White males. But the
Mm-hmm.
culture of the NFL is that of hip hop.
Right. Because that makes money.
Right. And see, that's why that's the point. You know what I mean? Like the driving force of it is that we don't have a problem using your culture, but we will handle the business. And I think that is part of why we find ourselves in this space. And I'm saying not just in the NFL, just in
Right.
general in Black America, that our culture is often put out there. And I when I hear people say representation, I often just ask the question, are you talking about a cultural thing? Because it's one thing to be culturally influential,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's another thing to be influential.
Right. Right.
You know
Absolutely.
what I'm saying? Like you are the driving force for the culture. You're the driving force for business. Your interests, your values are the driving force for everything. But I think that sometimes I'm just want to put this together. How do we push back on just being seen and not having, whereas our presence is not fully felt? That's the cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have to get into that space, right? Like I'm all good with being seen. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. But when it comes to the money, when it comes to the ownership, when it comes to the behind the closed doors business, our presence is not felt at all.
Right. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how we kick down those doors or get into that space. The only thing I can think of is to keep pushing and keep fighting somehow. I'll give you another example. LeBron James. A lot of people hate LeBron James and or try to argue whether he's the GOAT or not. But here's the thing about LeBron James. LeBron James has created his own sort of a black economy, if you will. I remember he stepped out there when when some people were telling him to shut up and dribble. LeBron James stepped out there anyway. And because LeBron James stepped out there, other players got behind him, and then they started to step out there. And then the next thing you know, LeBron James steps out, Dwayne Wade steps out, Carmelo Anthony. And then you have the ladies from the WNBA. And then you have other people that are stepping out there trying to get on the front lines. LeBron James hires his friend, Rich Paul, to manage all his affairs. Now, in the past, that wasn't being done. It was superstar athlete, go get the superstar agent that everybody else is using, and then let that agent make all the money, and then you go play ball. LeBron James changed that narrative. My guy, Rich Paul, his buddy, Rich Paul, I'm going to put him in charge of everything and make him a superpower, make him a super agent, have him control the money that's coming out of my pocket, and it's a lot of money. So now you have one guy, LeBron James, who is this economy within an economy. So not only is he making money for the NBA and whatever team he plays for, he goes back and he gets, okay, my guy Rich Paul and some other people around him. Now he's taking some of that money and spreading it out to him. Now Rich Paul is, I would hope, is doing some of the same things, bringing people up with him. So the success is not just LeBron James winning championships and LeBron James being famous and making movies and all this stuff. Think about that. LeBron James and Empire, one of the best players to ever play the game, brings along his guy and puts him in charge of the money, thus making that guy a millionaire.
Right.
And having access to even more capital to do more things and get into other spaces. So that's one thing. I know everybody doesn't have $1 million. Everybody doesn't have LeBron James money. We're not dunking basketballs. That's not what we're here for. But that's a great example of how people can make a difference, and you can do that on a small scale.
All right, and I'm sure, Brother Wisdom, you heard this story where the NBA. This is from TMZ. They reported it where the Department of Justice is has opened up an inquiry into the NBA about its prohibiting the growth of the Big Three League that was started by Ice Cube.
I've heard about that. Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? And so we're seeing, and so to the point that you were just making, like we're seeing that, yes, LeBron James is making moves within the given structure that he plays in. Mm-hmm. But the moment that we start to do something for ourselves, to tell our story, to be represented, to no longer say, I'm not going to be in the room, I'm going to build my own damn house.
Right. I like that.
Right? You know what I'm saying? We're getting to a space, now you're a threat. Now the DOJ, a government institution, has to come in and say, let me just open up inquiries. Not to say that y'all are guilty, but we have some inkling that something may be happening, preventing you, where you're preventing this alternative league that I think Ice Cube started because he wanted to, create a different space outside of the NBA. Now y'all are preventing this alternative league to get resources, players, capital, all types of stuff. And I think this is a lesson that is an ongoing lesson for us as Black America, that the moment you start to step outside of the system that of white supremacy, then that's going to be a moment where you're going to have some problems.
Well, I think
that speaks to the context, and the truth of the matter is that when we get and talk about context, we can't talk about the context of our plight, our condition, through the lens of white America anymore. We got to look at it through the plight, the lens of Black people telling our own stories.
Right, and the key to that is you got to keep going and you got to keep fighting, because the moment that you stop is the moment that everything starts to go away. You got to keep going, and you got to keep fighting. You got to keep figuring out different ways to maneuver in different spaces. And I know, people are coming after you. I know that. That just is what it is. But you got to keep going, because think about it. The long-term impact, every little piece makes a difference. Every little step makes a difference. I just listened to, I can't remember the exact quote, but I was listening to Martin Luther King, a quote from Martin Luther King. I think it was something about if you being in a race, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep going. Keep going. And that's the bottom line. You have to keep going. You have to have these conversations that like we're having right now and figure out, okay, what is the next move? What is the next space we can enter into? Social media is a huge space. We need to get into that space as well and figure out that whole thing. Everybody's trying to figure that out. Some people have already figured it out. Younger people have figured it out. I think Brother Roland has figured it out. Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think, regardless of how people say, well, I don't, whatever. Yo, Brother Roland is on. Y'all know Roland is on social media like no other. He constantly pumping this thing out. So I think that we look at it. You got to keep going, and I think that there is and I know I got to take a quick pause, but I want to kind of get your take, because when there's facts, when there's news coming across our screens, there's news coming across the radio speakers. When there's news coming across, that's going to affect Black Americans. Mm-hmm. That's going to affect how we see the world, how we see ourselves, and I want to kind of get your take on, if that information does not empower, but actually diminishes who we are, what is the proper response of the listener, of the watcher, of the reader? Mm-hmm. Look, we're going to take a quick pause and continue our conversation with Wisdom Martin. And of course, I'm going to bring up some of your thoughts on this discussion as we talk about the power of news, the pursuit of context and the truth. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds. as an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol. We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad, joined by my very special guest, Brother Wisdom Martin, who is a journalist and anchor for WUSA 9 in Washington, D.C. So we're talking about the power of news, the pursuit for context and truth. And Brother Wisdom, I can't thank you enough for your time that you spent with us this afternoon. Just as we wrap up this part of the discussion, it's always important for me to make sure that anytime we turn on the lights and get the cameras rolling, and anytime we open this show up, that we show up in a very authentic, honest, and truthful way, right? And it's very, very important. But I think that we are currently in kind of enmeshed in a culture where the truth is not going to always be shiny, nor is it going to be glossy, nor is it going to be glitzy and glammy. But it stands on its own. Whereas lies,
right?
Well, lies is a well-dressed lie. Mm-hmm. So how do we navigate from your vantage point, Brother Wisdom, as a journalist? You've been in this business for over 30 years. Mm-hmm. Like, people are watching news, and I know that the news situation, depending on the station, the audience could have gone down because people are not feeling what they're hearing. So how can Black people in this country kind of navigate through all of these spaces to get to the truth, to get to the real facts that will empower them and more importantly, that will inform them about what's going on?
Right. Well, the first thing is don't just believe anything that you see and hear, whether it's on social media or wherever it is. You always got to verify everything. No matter where it's coming from.
That's a lot of work, though. Hey, brother, listen, I hear that all the time, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot of work. I'm not going to hold you. That's not a lot of work. That is a lot of work. People who watch your newscast, then they're going to be like, well, let me see if Wisdom Martin, is he... Like, what is it? That's a lot of work. And I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, back in the day, you know it, too. Back in the day, if it came on a 6 o'clock news on the top 3 networks,
right.
And guess what it is? It's truth. Jesus and Moses put their stamp of approval on it. It's in the Holy Grail. It's described in it's the 11th commandment.
Right. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
But if we fact checking the news, that's a lot of work that you're asking people to do, right?
It is a lot of work, but that's where multiple sources. It's a lot of work. And don't get me wrong, you're right, because back in the day, back when it was no internet or internet wasn't a big thing. It was the 3 networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and whatever they said was whatever was said, and the newspaper. But people read the newspaper, right? So now you got the newspaper, the daily newspaper, and then you have how many times you go to somebody's house back in the old days? In the old days, And not only are you watching the three networks, but you see somebody outside reading the newspaper with their coffee. All right. So
Right,
now,
right.
I know it's newspapers was journalism back then too, and then they listen to the radio as well. So now you got
Right.
multiple different areas coming in. Nowadays, the problem is there's like 100 different networks. There's the internet, there's social media, and then there's Wisdom Martin up there on the TV telling you the news as well. So that's a lot going on. That's a lot going on. But the best way to handle it is the same way that the news people are supposed to handle it. Is we're not supposed to just get one piece of information and just run with it. It has to be verified. Where's this information coming from? The news people are supposed to be doing that as well. Make no mistake about it. All that stuff that on the local news level that gets on the news is coming from somewhere else, a trusted, reliable source before it even gets on television. Now, how it's presented is, that's where the representation and everything else happens, being in the room for the representation to give context.
Right.
But I'm telling you, if you're sitting there, like I've seen, just like we were talking about with those sports programs that you and I were talking about earlier, we sit there and we watch and have these people up there arguing back and forth about these games and these different quarterbacks and these different people and players. And you're like, wait a minute, what is he talking about? That didn't happen. And that's not accurate because I just sat here and watched the game and they just took bits and pieces out of it to create a narrative. So that's where the thinking part and the smartness has to come in for the viewer. I don't know if that's going to happen or how much of that is actually happening, but you gotta think. You gotta think, you gotta verify, you gotta go to your trusted news sources like Wisdom Martin. Shameless plug there. But I, in all seriousness, I do pride myself because I've been in this Washington, D.C. community for over 20 years now. And I started out on those streets connecting with people and taking what they're telling me back to the newsroom and saying, this is why this is a story. And it doesn't work all the time when it comes to, getting out there. But at least, again, you have to try. You have to try to get that information out there. And the viewers, the ones that are still watching, have to either trust what you're saying is going to be mostly true, mostly true, or you can verify it by going to another source, and not just the internet and not just social media, because that's, again, taking bits and pieces of this and that. And then you can obviously watch what people say and then take what you want from that as well. Oh, and make no mistake about it, like you said, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah,
to get all this together.
It is hard. It is hard unless you're like media junkies like us, right? Unless you work in it, that's what you do. But if that's not what you do, it is very, very hard. And the simple fact is, it requires you to be an informed consumer of news and information.
And therein lies the danger. Therein lies the danger, because if you're not an informed consumer and you're just taking information from anybody, therein lies the problem. Is anybody can tell you anything and you're like, that's fact, and I'm just going to run with it, when it could not even be true. It could have an agenda. It could be anything. So I know it's hard, man. It's hard. And I wish I had a magic pill to fix it, or some kind of way to fix it, but I don't have the magic pill. I'm just
look. Here's a consequence of that, Brother Wisdom.
Yeah.
You could be up there reporting the news, telling people straight facts, just laying it out. I'm up here. I'm up here. I feel like a professor or a teacher some days. I'm bringing up charts and quotes and stuff. And then guess what? Somebody gonna be like, I don't believe you.
Right.
And I mean a black person. They be like, I still don't believe you. I still don't believe it. And you're like, I'm being authentic. I'm putting my integrity out there on the line each and every day that you see me, and you like, I don't believe you. Or more importantly, I don't trust you.
Right. Brother Muhammad, and the bottom line is, as you know this, there are just going to be some people that you are not going to win over. I don't care what you do. If you take it and put it right in front of them, if I take this pen right here and put it right in front of them and say, this is a red ink pen, it's made by whatever company it's made by, and here's why this pen is relevant, there are going to be people, whether it's on social media or we're watching TV, saying, Wisdom Martin does not know what he's talking about. That pen is not red. That pen is fuchsia. And because he said that pen is red when it's fuchsia, and it's not made, that company is a company that sells Nike shoes and not Reebok shoes. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Those people exist, and you're not going to win them over. I put a post up. I did a story just a couple of days ago about Mildred Muhammad, who is the ex-wife of the
we had her on, Brother Wisdom.
Yep, the DC ex-wife of the DC sniper, right?
Right.
So I put a post up. It was just a clip of me interviewing her. She's a domestic violence survivor. She told her story about that. And all the comments were like, oh, that's awful how they treated you. It's an amazing story. And then one comment, well, technically it's not the DC sniper because all the people he shot were in Maryland and Virginia. So you need to get off TV because you're not telling the truth. You see what I'm saying? Now, do you think that I'm going to win that guy over?
No.
Do you think I'm going to win him over? He didn't care anything about domestic violence. He didn't care anything about Mildred Muhammad. He just cared about it being called the DC sniper, as if I made that up myself and created that myself. It was a whole, you know what it was. It was a DC area.
Yep.
It was a DC area because DC, Maryland, and Virginia, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And you don't have to explain it. No, real talk. Like on my off days when I feel like being a complete ass, I respond to certain posts like that. And they're like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to do it. But no, you don't have to explain it. Let me just share this very quickly. You don't like my music. You say politics doesn't change people's minds. Culture does. That's it. Let me just tell you. That's why we call the show The Culture, because we underestimate, and I think, Brother Wisdom, you know this, we underestimate the power of culture.
Right.
We act as if that's not a problem, but we make our decisions. And I'm saying from the simplest things to the most serious of things, it's rooted in our culture, especially for Black people, where we live, how we go about to entertain ourselves, where we work, what cars we drive, what clothes we wear, what foods we eat. We are influenced by our culture. Let me put this out here. Boza Blake. Boza, you said it always question the source of any information. You put out a book up there, Boza. You said Informal Logic by Copey and Burgess Jackson is a good book to start with. Copey and Burgess Jackson is a good book to start with. So I appreciate you, Boza, for posting that. You're absolutely right. You are not a victim. You say you have to vet your information sources. Almost every source puts a spin on it.
Well, I mean, there is always the basic information. There's the flat line of information. It's like this is actually what happened. Now, outside of that is when the story starts getting crafted. But again, just like the person said, I know it's a lot of work, but just you got to verify and know where this information is coming from and decide in your mind how much of this information is real. Does it sound right? Just question it. Does it sound right? Well, this doesn't sound right. Okay, let me verify it some more. But a lot of times that's for us and the people who are the hardcore news junkies, like you said.
Absolutely. Brother Wisdom, I got to let you go, but I appreciate you, brother, for your insight, for your expertise, for bringing it home and making it relevant and using those sports analogies, brothers. I got to bring you back on, man. Because there's just so much. There's so much. Yes, sir.
Look, and I forgot. Shameless plug. Wisdom Martin wrote a book. My first book is called Pass Interference. It's the history of Black quarterbacks in the NFL. You can verify the sources on that as well. But I got lots of information on here going all the way back to the 50s, dealing with racism and quarterbacks all the way up to current times. So, So, again, you can read the book, buy it anywhere books are sold, and you can verify all the information that's in the book as well. Verify.
There it is. Hey, y'all, make sure y'all follow Wisdom Martin on all social media platforms. And more importantly, tune into his broadcast, to his newscast on WUSA 9, especially if you're in that area. And I'm talking about Washington, D.C. I'm talking about, let me stop being a jokester. Like we don't know where D.C. is.
Right.
Well, make sure y'all tune in. Brother Wisdom, thank you so much for your time. And again, brother, thank you for being so good for the culture.
Thank you very much. It is an honor and a pleasure, Mr. Muhammad. I appreciate it.
Oh, brother, thank you. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, I'm going to share with you a story about Harriet Tubman in the city of Philadelphia, of how she's going to get some love in the city of brotherly love. Stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. All right, so we just kind of chilled out in D.C. with my brother Wisdom Martin, and big shout out to him for his time and being a part of the conversation. But let's make our way up to Philadelphia, folks, the city of brotherly love. And it is in Philadelphia that there was a little controversy around how to honor one of our great legends, heroes, one of the greatest women of Black history, Harriet Tubman. Now, apparently, folks, the city of Philadelphia wanted to do something different. They wanted to honor the legendary freedom fighter by putting up a statue outside of City Hall, but it went awry when the city decided to choose a white artist to create the statue without competition. There was no bidding process for it. No one knew what was going on. And so when they announced that this white artist was going to do this special statue that would sit in front of City Hall in the city of brotherly love, y'all know what's going to happen. People didn't like it. Now, the white artist, they had contacted last year Philadelphia city officials, according to the reports, offered the commission to Wesley Wolford, who is a white sculptor from North Carolina. The city contacted Wolford after a traveling version of his 2017 statue of Tubman appeared at City Hall. But by him being a white artist in the city of brotherly love, Philly, that is full of nothing but vast culture and artistry, folks weren't trying to buy that. And especially since the city contacted Wolford without any type of competition, nothing was done. Guess what? The city had told Wolford, you know what? So sorry. But because of the protest, because of the outrage around this situation, we're going to have to just go through this competition, a bidding process. And as a result of that, another artist was chosen by the name of Alvin Pettit. He beat out 4 of the semifinalists with a design called A Higher Power, the Call of a Freedom Fighter. At least, can we post that picture? I want to show you. This is a badass statue of Harriet Tubman. I want us to post this picture of Harriet Tubman from this story because, folks, when you see this see this statue, you will understand why. Maybe, I don't know what Wesley Wolford would have done. I can't tell you that. But I want to show you what Alvin Pettit decided to do as he tried to symbolize the power, the strength, the leadership of our sister Harriet Tubman. Let me just show y'all this picture. Can we make that bigger, please? You can take me out the frame. Let's make this big because I wanna see them. Look at this right here, y'all. This of course is not the art. Let's move the lower third. Let's take that out. Let's take out the lower third. We don't need that right now. But this picture here, this is the statue of Harriet Tubman. Imagine this statue being in front of Philadelphia City Hall. Again, this design is called A Higher Power, the Call of a Freedom Fighter. Just keep that on the screen as I describe it. This is going to be a nearly 14-foot bronze statue, the first of a Black woman who is a historical figure in the city's public art collection, and it is portraying Tubman as a military leader and freedom fighter. If y'all look closely in this statue, right there in her waist, you can't make this stuff up. Look how dope this thing is. Right there in her waist is the gun, the famed gun. Of course, we know that she worked in many capacities, and she used that. She said she would use that gun if necessary, but she worked as a nurse for the Union Army during the Civil War. She helped lead over 150 Black soldiers on a gunboat raid in South Carolina. According to Mr. Pettit, she is shown in majestic prayer. Perhaps she is calling upon her faith or contemplating a battle. This woman was a soldier, a scout, a Union spy, a military strategist, and a war hero. Therefore, I captured a moment in time that shows her as a conqueror. Woo! Now, let me just throw this out here. Alvin Pettit is a Baltimore-bred artist. That's how we come from. That's how we come through the door in Baltimore. Baltimore-bred artist with this joint. There we go. But let me tell y'all something. I wish that there was a statue of this in cities across this country. This is a powerful depiction of a major figure in Black history. So I understand why Mr. Alvin Pettit was chosen to do this design for the city of Philadelphia. And congratulations, Brother Alvin, for getting this. But this right here, this speaks to me, y'all. I don't know about nobody else. Let me check in with y'all and see. Coretta, you said this is that is a beautiful statue of Harriet Tubman. Brother Damon, you got the hands clapping. Lana, my sister, you put the fire emojis and said, I love it. Demakra, you said a statue of Harriet Tubman praying to Father God in the name of Jesus. Come on, man. This is what's going on. This is what's going on. So big shout out to Alvin. The city of Philadelphia is going to get a blessing with this statue. And guess what? I can know because of the culture that we in, the time frame that we in, the mindset of many people, somebody's going to have a problem with this. Somebody's going to have a problem. But guess what? Who cares? This is our history. This is how we want our heroes and sheroes to be seen to the world. Stop making Black folks, freedom fighters, look weak and meek and oh my gosh, no. They coming through the door with fire. They coming through the door with faith. They coming through the door with fearlessness. So big shout out. I just love the statue so much. So big shout out to Alvin Pettit for this. And I'm glad that the city of Philadelphia decided to do this the right way with hosting a competition for that. And then that feels much more in alignment with the spirit of justice. But Harriet Tubman deserves to be recognized in such a major way. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that, man. I might just travel to Philly just to get a couple of pictures of that. But if you're in Philadelphia, bring your friends or family. Once this exhibition is, this statue is completed, man, we should flood that place. We need to flood that place. Take pictures and the whole nine and allow this to be an inspiration for the next generation. All right, excuse me. All right, folks, I thank y'all so much for the great show. I want to thank our very special guest, Wisdom Martin. Make sure y'all check him out on WUSA 9. But I thank all of you for tuning in for the fantastic chat that I saw happening today. Make sure y'all do your due diligence. Support us here at Black Star Network. If you enjoyed the conversation, I also got to thank my big brother, Sinead Wakor, for it. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure you go to our website at blackstarnetwork.com. Download the app for free. Follow us on social media at Black Star Network. And more importantly, give something. Give something that will help us to continue to power us in this movement. As you heard Brother Wisdom Martin say that there are only a few places that you can find this type of news. And guess what? We're doing this every single day. We're doing this with my show. We're doing this with Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're doing this with The Frequency with D. Barnes. We're doing it with all of our shows, The Black Table of Dr. Carr. But we need your support. So make sure you go to our website today at blackstarnetwork.com. Also want to give a big shout out to my production team, Joel, Shannon, Chris, Maddie, King Keenan, and my sister Lise. Thank you for making the show possible. And for all of you who did not join us in the chat, but you tuned in, thank you. Stay tuned. Up next at Roland Martin Unfiltered at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. But remember this, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we will talk tomorrow for another day, for the final day of the week of the culture, right here, only here, exclusively here on the Black Star Network. Talk to you soon. Have a great afternoon and evening. Peace.